to the most revered prince and lord, Lord Wilhelm Beckli of Becklissov, the most worthy provost of the canons of the Archdiocese of Magdeburg, most merciful prince Adam of Bodenstein. Doctor of Philosophy and Medicine wishes health through Jesus Christ. It is established that it is a very ancient custom and universally observed among nations, endorsed by good men for significant reasons, most illustrious prince, that those intending to publish books dedicate and ascribe them to men who excel far beyond others in virtue, authority, and power. For the first men, who were unrefined and simple, living scattered here and there whenever they taught either divine matters, natural things, or virtuous morals, they confirmed their teachings with the authority of great men, whom they even called heroes and gods. Therefore, the writings or teachings endorsed by such men seemed true and useful to all. By this means, many were bound together by a very strict bond of necessity. Then, however, when the vices of men greatly increased, and they began to blaze with envy and disputes, the wicked wrote infamous libels against magistrates and certain individuals. With the names of the authors suppressed, it came to be that not only all were compelled to add their names to their writings, but also offer and dedicate them to certain learned men as if to judges of the fruits of their own minds, so that these types of harmful writings would be extinguished. A third reason was also not insignificant. Since nothing is so sacred and perfect that it is not gnawed at by the teeth of the malevolent, they sought patrons for such dedications who, along with their own, would protect them from the slanders and venomous bites of all envious men and sycophants. When Pythagoras brought philosophy from Egypt to Italy, where it was neglected, he was compelled during the reign of Servius Tullius to establish a monastic community and teach in secret, whence his school and doctrine were destroyed by the powerful. For it is a great and splendid thing to have pleased great and praiseworthy men. Finally, they've tried to confirm the morals and whole life of the most excellent men with such dedications, as if with the best witnesses, and to propose their life studies. And whole family is an example for posterity to imitate, so that it might be clear in what offices and with what vigor of mind they lived, and by what method they chiefly cultivated their minds, the most excellent part of a man, for not all things suit all people, but similar things are rightly joined to similar ones. Therefore, I also, most magnificent prelate, when I pondered all the reasons for dedication, and carefully deliberated with myself whose patronage this little work of the most learned man Theophrastus should come. Into public, you first deservedly came to mind, who with authority due to the eminent nobility of your family and your singular virtues, prevail greatly among all, for who does not admire that renowned knowledge of law of yours, and at the same time such experience proven by long practice? You have conducted your entire duty into the most honorable actions, so that it seems to live in you. Who also does not embrace and praise your very sweet kindness and humanity in private conversations and affairs? In public matters, the highest prudence, fortitude in managing the most difficult affairs, in giving advice to the distressed and oppressed, marvelous promptness. All these, along with other most excellent gifts, the invincible Emperor Charles V, considering above all other most noble men, wanted you to be his helper in managing affairs, and granted you the office to hold the position of Marshal of the Empire, in which you served for many years with the greatest praise. But these things, since they are very well known not only to all Germans, but indeed to the entire world, lest my meager speech diminishes rather than extends and amplifies the praises of your virtues, I will say nothing of them except this one thing, namely, that I perceive them to be greatly adorned by your outstanding knowledge of natural things, by which, as by a very bright light, you surpass not only the most noble men, but also the most learned, who profess themselves philosophers. While I was pondering these and several other things in my mind, and I was considering sharing the book on anatomy by the most learned Theophrastus with everyone, there is no patron among all more suitable to me for this purpose than you, who both understand the matter and would protect it with the easy enhancement of your name. This plan and purpose of mine, to bring it to completion, it cannot be said how much a man of not ordinary learning, prudence, and wisdom, Mr. Henricus Faulkner, the most worthy chancellor of the very renowned city of Basel, the best patron of learned men, lest he be incited, and, as the proverb goes, spur the running horse, whenever he mentions you, whose authority has great weight among me and our fellow citizens, for he himself well deserves from our republic, and in his greater dignities have brought many benefits to it. This man, I say, grave and eloquent, very much praises your virtues, and the present example shows, since you delivered to him water extracted by chemical art, which quickly restores and often raises up people afflicted and prostrated by the most cruel disease of apoplexy, as we have often experienced in our citizens to great benefit and much admiration from many. because in that and many other exquisite diseases very clearly that crude and too much compounded medicine did little or nothing good. But the refined and subtle, purified from its dregs, quickly penetrates the powers and demonstrates health benefits. For this is the soul and life of things, which exists in small quantity but in action is large and immense, as I learn more and more every day by the most certain method of judging from experience. For several years, to confess frankly, I pursued this most excellent part of physics, mad with insane hatred, because I did not understand the allegorically and obscurely written things, nor did I see the most delightful forms of things. But now, enlightened by some light, every day more and more, the contemplation of this matter joins. And I am set aflame by this action I see, if a true separation of things is made by the art of spagyrics, the sweetest and most useful things are found, in which one can behold the marvelous works of the omnipotent God, which most people, while they do not see nor understand them, most shamefully laugh at and scorn. For ignorance, that horrible beast, always opposes true knowledge, and a depraved mind, knowing little, persuades itself that it knows everything, and considers the things it does not know to be either not true or of no importance. For nature, the wicked flatter themselves, seek the juice of their own vices, and very reluctantly lower their proud crests, who will certainly not allow that we can ever separate water and oil from pure honey by distillation, which yet we truly know how to do. What would they say if they saw with their eyes salts of any kind rise up in the alembic, so that the taste and smell remain in the waters? By this art we have extracted the water of Armonic salt, which retains the sharpness and the whole flavor of its salt, and is supremely penetrating. So much so that it leads or dissolves gold into the truest liquor, almost of sky blue color. Corals, in a few days, in, rough and very poor, we dissolve naturally, most known and useful, non-toxic, and turn into a very clear liquor which harms no one, and penetrates all parts of the body very quickly, and restores them with natural vigor. This certainly is the way corals should be taken, not flints or reduced or ground into powder for digestion, which as they are taken, they are ejected without any digestion, and their nature remains intact after they have penetrated the body. And if we can see that these corals or stones have benefited the human body, which is expelled together with the excrements, how much more the substance itself, the soul, and the whole dissolved virtue, thus prepared so that it can easily transfer all qualities to intact limbs, and in fact recreate and preserve the body by its own nature, warding off and expelling harmful things. Although these things are great and very useful, much more wonderful and useful things are found daily. We have discovered an art by which we free a man suffering from epilepsy for 20 whole years. This medicine is so mild, natural, and suitable for the body that a healthy person can drink it without any inconvenience. What I ask is more marvelous and effective in curing diseases than vitriolated oils, culture terris, antimony, sulfur, wine, and many others, whose various and most excellent effects are described, both elsewhere and in Theophrastus's little books on long life, which I offered and delivered to my most serene and most ample lords, the Venetians, last year. Concerning these oils, many things are written falsely and vainly, as I have learned from experience. Hence it happens that not a few men, prudent and learned, moderately versed in this art, are now convinced that these things can either never be done or not found by human ingenuity. Wherefore, if they see something beyond their opinion, they greatly marvel, among whom is a man most noble by birth, very experienced in things, Lord Vincentius Magius of Brescia, a citizen of Basel, and our most dear friend, who often finding me engaged in chemical studies, is brought into great admiration, that at the venerable age of 70 years may notice the marvelous effects of things prepared by art, and understand that the greatest and most effective powers lie hidden in the penetrable parts of bodies, which God, for the sake of all good, has entrusted to certain craftsmen to use. This is your liquor, of which we have previously made mention, clearly proves a very difficult disease in paradise, from which it is not only clearly evident that you love all arts and disciplines, but also that you favor and promote the learned. From which it is not only clearly evident that you love all arts and disciplines, and that you favor and promote the learned, but also that you take great delight in this more subtle philosophy, and benefit others. This indeed pious and humane pursuit has greatly inspired me, that I, for the sake of establishing a greater and closer friendship with you, most generous man, dedicate these books on anatomy to you. In these, the author proposes a double anatomy, one crude and easy, which he calls local, the other subtle and somewhat more difficult, which he calls essayed. The former has hitherto been celebrated and practiced by both the learned and unlearned alone. This latter, truly, they have left it far superior or entirely untouched or compelled by truth. They have marked it so obscurely by handling other things, that no one has discovered it to exist in the nature of things. Indeed, those skilled in it are not without their praise, because they learn and teach the position, order, and relation of parts in dissected cadavers, and with this knowledge, they can more easily judge which member is in pain and which related parts are affected. Nevertheless, such is the case, as also attested by Andreas Vesalius, that butchers and executioners are far more skilled in this than most physicians, and the common people easily, provided they inspect the dissection or dissection of the parts, can learn it. The other, however, does not seek its doctrine from the dead, in which many principal parts lose their true position and form, but teaches the living things which require ingenuity, diligence, and at the same time the experience of many things joined to the knowledge of causes. For it is the knowledge of all natural things, insofar as they agree and cohere by sympathy to defend their common nature. Since nothing exists in this entire universe that is not connected by a bond of nature with many others, and opposed to many others, for indeed all things are bound by a Herculean bond, and all things in turn are separated by mutual Vadaminian hatred. Whence it happens that like cures like, and contraries are the remedies for contraries, because things that are concordant and joined under the same yoke communicate their strengths, support each other, and by one and the same effort repel and expel contraries. For indeed, related things, even though separated by great distances, share one and the same natural form, by which they agree, just as diverse forms in the same general category, which we can prove with infinite examples, but one will suffice for us, for the sake of illustration. The position, situation, quantity, external form of the brain, with its membranes and nerves, can be investigated through local anatomy with no great labor. But otherwise, no one would understand the universal nature of anatomy in the largest world of things, or man, unless they linked the natural connection of all parts of the world to the action itself. For the brain has stars, constellations, and certain regions of the sky, and parts related to each other, which are well positioned, and the brain itself is simultaneously well affected by common nature. Otherwise, if not, the brain suffers, which anyone can notice in certain brain diseases that rage at different times. Next, it is established that one of the elements is connected to the brain, not only to all, but also that parts of air, water, and earth benefit it in wonderful ways. Therefore, sometimes men miserably afflicted by brain disorders are quickly cured in various places and restored to their original state by waters. We also see that rivers, springs, and some thermal baths benefit the brain. Some, conversely, harm it due to one and the same or dissimilar nature. Some are alleviated from all languor by the help of a unique relative, which many consider to be miraculous. Who does not marvel at mummia and certain parts of a human applied to their similar counterparts as remedies? Among beasts, though there are different kinds, many species are useful to the brain through a shared connection, having acquired its nature from the very beginning. Many parts of beasts are also bound by a most certain bond to the brain itself. No one of sound mind even doubts that trees, shrubs, herbs, and many of their parts are found which provide assisting hands to the brain. The ancients did not have the planet's crown for no reason. Finally, metals and stones, being infinite number, are friendly to the brain, I beg you, who does not see. Versed somewhat in chemistry, since many resemble the shape and form of the brain externally, all of which, when properly prepared and taken internally, repair an infected brain and restore it to its former nature. Indeed, even they cure by hanging or vapor. In this way, the most ignorant empirics sometimes perform wonders through the knowledge of one thing, and thereby obtain fame and wealth for themselves. They then most disgracefully go astray, because they are ignorant of the true anatomy of the matter, and apply what pertains to the brain to the heart, stomach, lungs, or any other part of the body. Just as a local anatomist does not seek the brain in the hands or feet, so neither does the ascetic administer the main parts to any part of the body, and although medicines of very different kinds are taken through one mouth, each one tends to the part similar to itself. Similar things congratulate similar ones. So also does your most proven liquor naturally suit the ventricles of the brain, which are wonderfully refreshed by its presence due to common essence and effective friendship when they are in danger, in ways that no other things that are equally hot, dry, humid, thin, or even thick can refresh. But only with a concordant nature, because the adverse part is joined much more easily with the help of many things. Therefore, as Paracelsus himself says, no one should boast that he is an anatomist when he knows how to dissect a cadaver in which no life spirit exists, but rather he who is skilled in the living. Concordance of things with the whole body and its parts. For there are some things that strengthen all the principal parts. In this and in your own vast experience, I gather not only from the aforementioned liquor, but from many other things, which your ingenuity has cultivated and your extensive experience has proven, the wise and skilled are able to show amazing observations which have helped and been tested in various human treatments. So I bring remarkable skills in the field to completion, which neither doctors nor surgeons can accomplish. Rustic people in the fields learn more about this anatomy from brute animals by observation, who know very well not to transplant any plants to any lands without care. These people, when they are ignorant of the causes and do not reduce their experience to art by the help of memory, leave few things to posterity, although their traces always appear. But your clemency, if it recalls those things that it has seen, read, heard, and experienced about such anatomy, will undoubtedly help this learned and useful little work. And it will be worthy of our Theophrastus in medical art and the whole of philosophy, who is very skilled and learned, who indeed obscurely hands down some things because he teaches new arts with new terms. This obscurity I have certainly tried to explain and illustrate with clear and plain speech, but the author's mind everywhere I wish to retain, and I use a very intricate copy. Therefore, if the lovers of truth, whom we wish to help and guide in the matter, find something not so clear and manifest as they would like, I beg that they do not blame me. However, to the malevolent who approve of nothing but their own work, I advise that, putting aside all self-love, they diligently consider and learn this anatomy, so that they can better benefit mankind. If they scorn this good and very useful advice, your singular and marvelous authority and your great power joined with the truth will restrain them. May the best and greatest God grant that your clemency and greatness may live long, safe, and unharmed for all of us. Farewell, from our house and those of our friends. Alone in transit. 15 degrees of Aquarius, the year 1561 in Basel. On the anatomy of Theophrastus Paracelsus. Before the cause and origin of pustules or the French disease are enumerated, it is proper to have diligently applied oneself to anatomy, since what is worth knowing in this place ought also to be perceived by the eyes, which pertains especially to surgery, for from this follows the clear explanation regarding the origin of these things. For beyond the primary matter, nothing else is incumbent upon us but what this alone indicates. Although anatomy has been relegated from its true origin to the point that it has been thought until now that what pertains to this can be abundantly perceived from a dead man, or rather a cadaver, which I indeed consider to be of minimal or no value, although there are those who still believe this even more, and attempt to gather not a few things from it. From this, medicine is indeed deduced into theory, and without being upheld by great errors thus far, for some reasons recognize this very thing, namely that it is much different than anatomizing a dead body. For in this way, since anatomy ought to make any physician proficient, it is necessary for it to be twofold, one local, the other essential. Since therefore the local must be one, by what method it can be discerned in a cadaver I do not see, unless by preceding knowledge of external anatomy, which the anatomy of an extinguished body ought to follow. But if there were at least any measure of true medical art among us, you would certainly admit that no nature nor essence can ever be found in it, just as some of your own also admire. That a dead body should be proposed in place of reason, from which something may be taken that will be beneficial to the living, not considering the essence, property, and virtue, which are the chief aspects of anatomy, to be desired in it and plainly to be dead at the same time. Therefore, I wish you to be advised, if the preservation of the living body is as important to you as is your concern, do not in any way seek its health in the dead. The other, which is essential, has indeed remained intact until now, but it contains the chief part and the entire sum of the medical profession within itself. However, just as it is now common practice to neglect and discard the better things, and to observe the worst things with great diligence, so too in this torpor and laziness has prevailed. For the best of everything is neglected by us, but the rest pleases more, proceeds more strongly, and has more influence among you than feline jaundice. For from this comes such a deep and entangled error in both your theoretical and practical medicine, as if it had crept into the whole profession through certain tunnels. Chapter 2. In the beginning, due to the darkness of your mind, accept local anatomy in this way, so that you may understand something from it that agrees with the following reasoning. This is indeed against those who only study this and think it is sufficient to know how the lung or liver are suspended, or how the other parts are also situated. For if medical reasoning were applied in such matters, it would not be possible that some benefit would not accrue to you from this. But since indeed the body is one, it also requires observing living anatomy from the region, living bodies indeed, and those corresponding to this equilibrium should certainly be considered. If you properly complete the anatomy here and there, it is necessary that you give me a place where I may compare part with part. For the condition and structure of the member's substance corresponds so much to the sign, in which it least lies hidden. Therefore, you ought to seek anatomy beyond what a cadaver prescribes, and do not turn this into a fault against me, as if I did not know the diaphragm, or I am compelled to assent to your trifles. For it is evident reasoning, because the anatomy of life shows much more to another life than if I were to inquire into the deceased for that which pertains to life. Wherefore, anatomy must be observed in this, in what manner diseases spread in it, which places or regions are peculiar to their own diseases, whether they correspond or not. If indeed you have an understanding of this anatomy, you can rightly boast that you have in some way given yourselves the name of philosophers. By diligently and accurately investigating what is of primary concern to the physician, as well as observing the generation of fruits which are born in their peculiar places, and similarly the cypress, and those in other places. For who proceeds with this or not from anatomy? Therefore it must be observed in what manner things so unite in confluence, so as to obtain its exact knowledge and reasoning and origin. Therefore, propose to yourselves a living anatomy, not that which is a struggle with corpses, from which you can elicit nothing at all, except what nature comprehends extrinsically. Therefore, this is the task, this is the labor, that you now apply more effort here than before. For when this has first been erred in, it will have been entirely in vain, unless perhaps Mercury has brought you present and favorable help. To this end, the anatomy of the microcosm must be understood together with its places and regions in the aforementioned diseases. Not that I accommodate diseases to their locations, but to fulfill my duty to you and to make the matter clearer, I reiterate the same things. At least so that anatomy may not be omitted from its flourishing and its exaltations. Chapter 3. Furthermore, in the species of anatomy, it must be known, just as gold, which displays its anatomy, that is, in its own member in so many regions, yet it remains universally in one body, although it is separated by many thousands and dispersed far and wide. Just as gold thus lies scattered, its parts divided by its brilliance, so too must anatomy be understood. Just as the whole world is one body, so too all men are one body in diseases. But as the division extends, namely that in one vein often lies gold, yet beyond this vein, in the same way diseases also behave. As often as a man, so often likewise the vein's mineral. Hence it is clear enough that all mortals suffer from one and the same disease, just as it is impossible that all kinds of lands are rich in gold. Let this be an example of that matter. For as many places and regions as there are in which metals are produced, and in diverse ways, just as all procreations have their outcome, similarly it occurs in man. Just as neither bolus nor Laphantius can be covered with gold, so neither can that same condition in man be susceptible to heart disease. And do not interpret this as malign on my part, that I have detained you so long in anatomy, for your ignorance and the immense trifles of the ancient writers drive me to this point. If our discussion were particularly about this alone, as I had intended, I would more clearly bring your errors to light and plainly expose your wound where it hurts the most. But henceforth, the fruit to be gathered is none other than that you finally, having abandoned this dead anatomy, consider and weigh the matter with an even balance, as they say, whether it has been falsely or ineptly written thus far. Whoever, up to our times, have attempted to discourse on anatomy, by which indeed both you and they have so polluted the medical profession that it is almost entirely extinct, although nothing remains for you but to boast momentarily about the construction of Ferrara's columns and about the Perugian actors. However, such tricks particularly delight the French, who have a perpetual and tireless spirit for extracting juice, and to whom we Germans, like barbarians, readily and often give money, as they say, without considering that whatever has to do with ghosts is nothing but a ghost itself. Therefore, this is not so much medicine as a certain nefarious deceit and imposture that deserves to be rightly called. Chapter 4. Wherefore I think it not undeserved to ascribe such differences to anatomy, but I also consider it the foundation of the medical profession, since the lands are so varied kinds are, which shows nothing else but that the divisions of humans are as varied as those of the lands. Also, just as every land has its own peculiar fertility, and each produces something different, so too every human carries their own unique and peculiar disease, which you must understand in this context, because in the same way the human body has various dispositions, natures, and essences. Hence it is as impossible to procure something from a body in which such a nature has been profusely present as it is to produce gold from mud. And just as each land has its peculiar destined fruits, so too in the microcosm, bodies are so varied and various diseases are continually produced. Moreover, whatever is equal to the body displays equal diseases, no differently than equal soil produces equal apples. And this indeed is the anatomy to which it is fitting for you to apply both faith and study, not only considering that here a pear tree grows there an apple tree, and again in another place an oak or a beech, but rather by what means this kind of habit may be allowed to propagate simultaneously and together. For I consider this to be the highest and foremost thing in a physician, that he understands well the confluence of anatomy, in what manner places and diseases correspond with each other. Not because this should be done without external anatomy, but rather that it should be conducted through the same into confluence, the understanding and knowledge of which, when you have it, you will easily move me to your opinion. For as you see that there are 4 essences which give their own benefit to each individual, so it is necessary that the same essences converge the entire anatomy. I ask you to consider by what means this happens. For indeed, just as fruits manifest themselves externally, you must consider in the same order and standard each particular disease, and not make any further mention of corruption, putrefaction, or such dreams, with which you have hitherto been so overwhelmed that you have chosen the worst things as the best without any consideration. Moreover, although it may be possible for a division of anatomy to occur so that one part in one will be for surgery, the other will remain in physics itself. However, that division does not seem to pertain entirely to the matter at hand. For the geometry of anatomy indeed provides understanding by another means, and the condition of the Iliad itself reveals this, especially since it is one body. Chapter 5. Furthermore, it is essential to understand anatomy, and this chiefly for the sake of confluence. For what out of all things that pertain to the physician equals this understanding of confluence, especially since nature has almost produced nothing without anatomy? Hence it is that it has separated all kinds and species within itself. Therefore, in what way cutting, extending, and so miserably tearing apart a dead cadaver is anything acquired from it that will be useful to the living? Since that which you are grasping for here is nowhere present anymore. However, just as there are 10 kinds of apples, there are also 10 kinds of pears. And this entire universe under one single anatomy. Similarly and likewise with as many kinds, there are kinds of jaundice and likewise of paralysis and of all other diseases besides. And do you find diseases of this kind in your anatomy? Or do you, by this reasoning, unless perhaps, as I suspect, it is pleasing to you French to deceive the Germans in this way, attempt to seek more languishing ones? Why not rather investigate that which has long since escaped from here? Although this and all other diseases consist under one and the same anatomy. These things are only set against the 4 humors, which can neither bear any place nor reason in anatomy, nor can any way in which the origins of disease are derived from them be comprehended. Why then do you boast so much about your humors? Why do you so frequently throw around pompous and sesquipedalian words? Since diseases arise no differently than apples in their places, and just as with them, it is also ridiculous to consider blood or phlegm in the generation of diseases. For in this place mustard seed provides the essence of the matter, and whatever needs to be known here is abundantly proposed. Therefore, if you lack this, who then for it will eventually dispel the foolishness from you, since it has taken such deep roots that it cannot be pulled out by anyone in any way? Indeed, it is certain that he who can give and take away the cores from apples can also rule over diseases, not by consulting the 4 humors first. Therefore, the understanding of these illnesses must be judged solely by anatomy and not by the humors. Please contemplate either my apples, for they grow neither from color nor from melancholy, but rather from the confluence of anatomy. Apply your noses. Hear and smell what is specific that attacks this fruit at the root, and compare it to these illnesses. For in the same way, diseases are born no differently than fruits from the earth. Therefore, the body itself is like the soil of all diseases. For from it, just as fruits are produced from the earth. Since the fruits of the body are diseases, look around and see where mustard seed should be investigated, which you have so far wrongly accepted as being from Eruca. But just as you are accustomed to scorn everything that is most useful, so too in this matter you observe your former custom. Chapter 6. Admit that cosmography is your anatomy, as well as the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, and the meridianal line. Similarly, in what manner the 4 mothers are situated in their own anatomy. For if you accurately understand these, you will have the microcosm whole in its own place. Contemplate how anatomy is arranged in itself with both the hands and feet constituted, and consider what are the fingers in this, what are the principal parts, and the like. And although not all are composed at once for the purpose of performing a journey, or even for touch, they are nevertheless the members of one single element. For just as the hands and feet perform their peculiar functions, so too is this joined with the fruits, which are their regions, and in the same manner the regions are perceived in the earth. Furthermore, observe what kind of body water has an anatomy, just as its parts are minerals, so too is the chaos of their name in a member, and the galaxy is the spine of fire. Chapter 7. First observe that gems are generated from the element of water, that is a member of its element, and metals too, which are another member, and ores are another member, finally stones. And this itself is another member, etc. Just as these members differ from others in their regions, so too in man, therefore consider the entire world as a body of its element. Nevertheless, just as the members of metals are scattered in their respective regions, sometimes 100 miles apart, copper distant from copper, sometimes a few stadia separate sapphires from sapphires, similarly sulfur from sulfur, marble from marble widely spread, yet nevertheless each one is still a member. In the same way, in the body such places must be observed, namely as the locations of minerals, fruits, or impressions are constituted among themselves in a similar way, and in the body. Certain locations are destined for some illnesses. Indeed, all humans are one body, yet among them there exist many and varied regions. In one region, dropsy occurs, which is a fiery impression in some people. Heart. Disease appears, which is a form of chaos. In others, fever erupts, and it is an impression of the earth. Similarly, the anatomy of any human is mainly positioned in such regions. Just as these minerals are not found outside those regions, nor are these corrosive ulcers found anywhere beyond these parts. For just as in this part, bolus or clay is a body in which no mineral location exists, similarly, the principal parts do not suffer such things within themselves. Chapter 8. Since it is fitting for someone to be thoroughly experienced in the practice of medicine according to the principles of anatomy, what exceptional benefits will a cadaver provide you in your schools? Or what refined judgment will it bestow? And yet you have taken offense at me for attempting a living anatomy for a short time, which, for the reasons I have stated, is not unjustly done by me. And why corrosives do not ulcerate in the principal members as they do in the external parts. If I could gather this very thing from the place alone, as you think, you would rightly glory, calling me a wanderer and an error, and interpreting my experience unfavorably. Whereas I have hitherto chiefly striven to ensure that philosophy is not utterly forsaken, and that mundane anatomy is made somewhat clearer and more perspicuous. I can also rightly call you to this our order, so that you may have knowledge of things seen from the ground up, higher than any well, and be able to properly distinguish each type of soil from another, as well as any land from another, which evidently contains more minerals than another, and which land is that where the cedar has its place, and in another place the pine, or where from the element of water the diamond is produced, or where the stone exalts itself. If you have learned this cosmography not only according to the letter, but also according to the lines of nature, I could not say that you are not doctors, by which name I have thus far considered you unworthy. But you will never persuade me to believe that there is another anatomy in the physical body instead of that which is worldly, or that impressions cannot be compared to illnesses. And just as you have not yet allowed the unchallenged fixation of the chaos of the members, so you will never extinguish this fuel for me. If I leave no hope with you, by which you might agree with my opinion, is because what obsesses and inhabits you inwardly and makes you affected in mind is the same as a doctor who finds his own health odious. Chapter 9. Just as I previously established local anatomy, so I want you to understand this principle, that the locations relate to illnesses which parts correspond in one disease, such as those suffering from itching, or those in alopecia, in dropsy, in ascites. Similarly, those that worms and ascarides foster. Also, which places are of life, which are of death, where the mummy hides, where the falling sickness lies, where paralysis reigns, where lethargy, and all the rest of the diseases. I wanted to indicate this whole concept so that you might understand local anatomy in this way. Just as you know that gold lies hidden in its ore, so you should clearly discern the differences between the regions of steel and iron, and in which body the ruby flourishes, or where the beryl hides itself. In what manner amber and coral arise, how their bodies do not indifferently have their places everywhere. And in this principle I wish to conclude, just as there are as many and as varied illnesses, so too there are bodies and locations, just as external anatomy assigns to each creature its own body, and constitutes it as proper and peculiar. For as Dulic does not produce silver, so the liver does not cause dropsy. Therefore a dead cadaver can be justly rejected and despised, as it is hardly suitable for this purpose, since this knowledge does not arise from the physical body, but rather from the external, and you must necessarily gain the knowledge of the body's intrinsic nature. Chapter 10. Furthermore, something must be said about aphata anatomy. Why it is done, this is the reason that moves us, because you continually try to inquire into the subject. Have you not had even a small amount of judgment in yourselves until now, that there has never been a subject in life? What indeed do you seek in it, knowing that there is something greater from which the subject should suffer? Please consider the earth, whether it wills it or not, it is compelled to admit its outcome. What then can the liver finally prevent? Does your method of healing have any judgment, since you contemplate the subject just as the disease and think that by? Knowing the subject, the matter, if the gods please, is well managed, you know this opinion and reasoning. Are you not ashamed, you who are endowed with such gross ignorance, to accept the subject as the matter and cause of disease? Has it never occurred to you, or could it not occur due to the abundance of wine, that every subject is liable to an accident? If this is admitted to you, what, I ask, remains in the subject, when the accident still persists? I say this because any accident exists in anatomy, although you may circle around the subject, what you receive from your preceptors, since they themselves could not find anything better than you, being only devoted to their words. Therefore, with this being the case, the subject must be covered by an accident, so that it may fit into your fourfold divisions. To what purpose is your bile? To what purpose are your humors? To what purpose are your qualities? And to what purpose even the 6 natural things, and as many unnatural, should this be the method of the medical profession? Therefore I cease to marvel at such a great number of languishing people everywhere, both in the houses and in the streets, of phalanx and an infinite multitude. Chapter 11. How dare you say that humors, complexions, qualities, etc. should be considered in any way when they do not pertain to any disease? It has never persuaded me that it is sufficient to be guided by the signs against me which you have relied upon until now. For you will reply, and finally admit to me your theory and those difficult subtleties of your foundation, besides the subject being nothing else. Where then will the iphata anatomy remain from which the disease arises? It indeed requires no small effort from you with all your books, on which you have relied for so long, as if each one were a microcosm. You accuse the cosmos of being similar, while in reality you convince yourselves that it is so. But who does this? For I willingly concede that your books and authors are more useful to you, your wives, and your children, in the tavern and cellar, than either I or my writings. However, whether this brings you some honor or some benefit to sick bodies, I wholly deny. Summarizing and concluding the matter, I say once and for all that it is nothing but sheer lies, and not in any way akin to the truth of sincere medicine, which you have hitherto so greatly laughed at, contrary to our reason. Nevertheless, as long as your bodies and kitchens are provided for, and somehow your souls are also taken care of, you are not much tormented. But what chiefly bothers me about you experimenters is that you use the same saddle, as they say, on all horses. If some Frankish knight were to do this, he would be called downright foolish and hardly skilled in his craft. Yet you Pelions, for so I like to call you, why you glory in red caps for so long, are much more foolish. Searching when something has once succeeded, you think everywhere to proceed in the same way without any reason. But how ridiculous is that? Chapter 12. But where we finally address the anatomy spoken of, this is the chief and foremost argument of the matter, that the physical body must in no way be considered in regard to the origin of disease, nor anything done in the subject, nor is the disease to be investigated in it. But it is just as if, concerning an apple, where it might grow from, I ask you to say if you know anything. Do you say it comes from the earth? You are wrong. The subject is the first thing, or from wood, nor is this a very likely subject of the thing. Indeed, you speak about this matter no differently than if someone, stretching his head out the window, says he was born from the house or the window. Or because the chick of a hen breaks its head from the shell, do you immediately say it was created from the egg? Certainly you err in the whole matter, as it is said, by a wide margin, and in the whole sky. Although more ignorant, and those who little understand the matter understand, I do not doubt your supporters. But you, most distinguished lords doctors, think it permissible for you to believe and do everything. Neither does Aristotle agree with me, nor do these men believe me, nor will they ever believe, who have so often deceived me, and who still attempt it, who only attend to their own interests. But if only they trust me, from whom both anatomies are known, I would have thought there to be more erudition in your libraries, where at least the idiots would be compelled to bring witnesses to your cause. If anyone comes out of some cave, you would immediately persuade yourselves that he was created there. Chapter 13. Tell me, I beg you, where does urine come from? Where does feces come from? Do you say urine is produced by the liver? How do you prove it to be so? Or from the kidneys? For then indeed you remind me of a certain soldier from Mantua going to Naples and saying that he came from Capua. But as for the feces, you say it comes from the stomach? So then what manner does the stomach have, or what sort of vessel is it in which there is so much dung from time to time? Is it from the intestines? These cannot be its lodging, not to mention that such a generation of anatomy cannot belong to cosmography. Nor am I surprised, since you say a boy is born in the womb and has no other cause than to exit through the vulva, so foolishly do you bring forth arguments. What then seems to you about this plasm? Does it proceed from the subject or from the efflate? Or in what manner is it born in the womb? Have you never considered that whatever enters must also have an exit? Thus apples are born, thus diseases are born. Therefore discern who is the parent of diseases, namely efflate anatomy. Chapter 14. So that you may know where urine and feces come from the dish and the cups. But where does the child come from? From the bones. And where do apples come from? From the center of the seed. All these things are invisible, for only the body is visible. Therefore consult, how does an apple reach the trunk and branches of a tree? Or how does a tree come out of the ground? And in what way in the womb is a child? When thus placed before you in the mouth, no doubts remain. For unless it enters through the mouth, then whence, I ask, do you get either urine or feces? What business do you have with the subject when you have no knowledge of efflate? I perceive that you want to know one thing from me, whence comes the stone in the bladder? Or do you say it comes from the place where it is located? You are now indeed a dead body, which could not make itself firm in life, but will perfect itself in the tomb. Whence does tartar come? Whence sand? Whether from the kidneys or from their regions? How does this happen? Explain it, please. Or if you do not wish this, let it not shame me to be instructed, because unless they enter through the mouth, or minerals are separated from there, it will never happen that either tartar, stone, or sand is born. Do you not wonder why I propose such arguments to you? Immense lies force me here, because you so forget what minerals hide in food, and much less do you notice. In what way separations of tartar occur in the microcosm? Are you really such doctors? Chapter 15. And now to finally clarify the matter and say it briefly, all diseases surely come from an external source into the subject. From this it follows that, as many apples, as many nuts, and as many other fruits there are also just as many diseases. And does it not shame you meanwhile to divide these into 4 parts, namely, this is melancholy, this is choler, etc.? Consider the element of fire, just as both snow and heat come from it, both cold and heat. Similarly, however many accidents of fiery impressions there are, so many are the ailments in the microcosm, and however many minerals, so many are also diseases, and however many of the been, so too many in diseases. What then do you philosophize about humors, putrefactions, and corruptions? Are you perhaps satellites who have corrupted in this manner? When curiosity so eagerly investigates diseases, please explain to me from where Savina is born. Do you say from choler? Then surely you injure the earth. For if you affirm that all 4 can be born from the earth, then you deceive both yourselves and your languishing ones. To remain silent about what you might perhaps object to me, who attributes its colors to the chalcedony. Whether it is melancholy or blood, who attributes its virtues to Melissa? Is it phlegm? By no means. But if you perhaps say, what do these have to do with the humors? I respond, no less than that you are unaware of this, as much as the origin of any diseases. For in both the understanding is the same, but because you do not even recognize the external, who has disposed each and everything there, whatever your ignorance covers up, you are supplied by fantasy. From the 4 humors, that is. Oh, how well you are instructed. Chapter 16. Have you never understood when the astronomer declares a star, when he speaks of the nature of planets, and of ascensions, and of conjunctions, comets, and such things? Do you think he is speaking about the body, that is, about that which has a name? Not at all. For he proposes his own essence, just as of the sun, whose beauty does not give heat, nor does the redness of the moon attribute the same nature, just as yellow hair, or lemon, adds no heat or benefit to the body, so also this essence helps. If they were to assume a body, where then would the nature of the same remain? Therefore they assume nature and make a dispatched body. Therefore you act differently in the microcosm than such a process indicates. It is necessary that in all your endeavors you are led around in error, which certainly happens. Contemplate the living man, whether the flesh sustains him or he himself sustains the flesh. Is life in the body 1 or 2? Which of them therefore sustains the other? Is this not true? That, which we lose and will never see again, this is exactly what we are talking about. For the other thing that hands handle, what does it have that would be useful to a doctor? Just as when an anthrax arises, what completes it, except blood and flesh? How then does it enter into anthrax? Tell me, please, where is its time? From where do its signs arise? If you were to say, with the body neglected, that it comes from the spirits of life, then you would be hitting the mark precisely. But the sum of this entire matter is this, that we recognize it from death, in this sense, because what escapes us, life, provides both prosperous and adverse health. Therefore, there is no need to consider why cancer is in the sky, how many legs it has, and whether the goat in the sky is remarkable for its green horns or perhaps for its blue ones. Rather, you should examine their lives, which excel all other forms. For from this, health and sickness arise. But if by any chance you strive to be good doctors, which your writings and the descriptions of remedies scarcely declare, then you would also observe these differences even in the simplest things, so that the body would be left aside and only the virtue would be removed. For in both the microcosm and the medical profession, the body is of no use, but rather life is in life. And this is the anatomy of which we are currently speaking. Chapter 17. But what does this mean, that you try to provoke against me lawyers, theologians, artists, sophists, and men of that ilk? For what business do I have with them, or they with me? If they were similar to me as a doctor, it would indeed be enough of my response, which they would accept as sufficient. Although I admit that all professions have a certain innate diligence regarding the medical art, it is not for any other reason than what some old women might hold to. For one reads, another listens, and each one is guided by their own study, thus they think this should also be shaped. But consider carefully yourselves, in what way you would wrest this club from my hands. For you will not frighten me, because I use some foreign words, from which, however, I do not doubt I will obtain more honor than disgrace. For it is for no other reason that they are foreign to you than because you have never changed your sky, remaining perpetually at home. Like a tortoise, if something from daily use deviates for a little while, or if anything occurs beyond the usual weekly markets, you immediately fail to distinguish between a goat and a he-goat. But if you once attended the fairs in Frankfurt, and examined the chair among the Muscovites, or what those who dwell at the ends of the earth do, then your proverb, it will easily slip your minds. Which you use frequently, I do not know. It is not in use. I have never heard it, nor read it. For once you have thoroughly traversed and experienced all these things, having been misled and ruined by Galen until now, you will easily notice. Yet not for this reason more than an old dog impatient of the leash, you are brought back to better conduct. Only to be taken away, to grow up in errors, is wasteful. For to expect better instruction from me, I do not say you should demand it, but merely expect it. Shame prevents, and it would plainly be ridiculous, and beyond dishonor, if you neglect your scepter from Vienna, and likewise so beautifully arrange the order of the Montpessolanas. However, my advice has always been neglected and of little name, and therefore the lesser the deception. Although I know well that you are far more liberally and much better rewarded by your patience than by yourselves. Hence, I easily infer that your situation was established for that reason alone. Therefore, as your mind so greatly looks towards it, to money and profit, not plainly from here, your plan is to retract me. For I admit that not a little profit is acquired by you from that apparatus of houses, garments, hangings so ambitious, pulpits so filled with every kind of book, and a tongue finally so felicitously eloquent. Nevertheless, it happens from this that I am less surprised that pimps, executioners, fugitives, and apostates of all deplorable things, lawyers, and whatever of that kind, which through laziness cannot seek a living beyond, join your fellowship, since the reasoning of both sides, yours as well as theirs, so beautifully agrees, that it is almost the same. I will say this frankly, it would be more for the Republic to remove such doctors from the midst, than to endure them with impunity, when by preserving one and another, they destroy 600 in different ways. How prosperously mixed is the dough of that flour, that Arabs, Greeks, Chaldeans, and Latins also agree so beautifully. Oh, my ears ring as soon as they are about to read these my writings. You could wear purple rather than the same color, to have woven together cheap cloths, and thus to display patchwork, although they will be of no importance in this way either. The end.